Alas, poor Yorick. I knew him, Horatio, a fellow of infinite jest of the most excellent fancy. So I had to memorize that whole thing, like the whole Yorick speech from Hamlet, for my musical theater class one day. And so now every time I hear Shakespeare stuff, that just immediately jumps to mind. But with that said, hello everybody! Welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to another one of our weekly Moriarty the Patriot discussion videos. Today we're here to talk all about episode 18, The Merchant of London. But before we get into the video proper, quick reminder if you haven't done so yet, to hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, set notifications to all, let all of AnyTube know that you're here, and let's go ahead and set a like goal this week. Let's go ahead and hit it at just 100 likes. Let's try to get 100 likes on this video before the end of the day. I'd sincerely appreciate it. So with that said though, let's go ahead and dig into this week's episode of Moriarty the Patriot. So, again, as I said with the whole Yorick thing, there's a lot of Shakespeare in this week's episode. It'd be great if, like, the character showed up, if, like, Shakespeare was somehow involved in all this. Would it make sense timeline-wise? Maybe he hopped in a TARDIS. I don't know. There's so much British stuff going through this. Why not? Just throw him in a TARDIS, have the Doctor show up, and he shows up with Shakespeare, and they meet tiny Moriarty. It'd be great. Anyway. But yeah, there's a lot of Shakespeare influence in this week's episode. And it's very clearly it's called The Merchant of London. I think you know it's supposed to be a play on The Merchant of Venice, which is an interesting play. But Will basically uses The Merchant of Venice as a bit of a trap. He uses it to sort of lure in Mr. Baxter into a false sense of security. And it's interesting, too, because when they say, like, when I see the title, like, The Merchant of London, I assumed that it was going to be Will in the position of, I can't remember his name now, but Will in the position of, like, betting that he won't cut off a pound of flesh because you can't do that without spilling blood, right? So that was my initial thought, but then Will is purposely being Shylock in this moment, and I'm like, why would you put yourself in a position to lose? You know, because we all know how that story ends. Like, you can't actually cut out a pound of flesh without dropping blood, right? So therefore Shylock loses. So when it comes to my boy Will here, I'm thinking, like, does he have a way around this, or is he using this on purpose? I wasn't entirely sure until we finally see it play out, where Will actually was using Merchant of Venice as a trick. A trick of sorts, right? Like, he knows that Mr. Baxter isn't actually going to, Mr. Baxter isn't thinking that far ahead, that Mr. Baxter's, like, probably thinking, like, oh, he's never actually going to use the Merchant of Venice clause against me, and even if he does, I know the way around it because Shakespeare wrote it in his friggin' play. And even his lawyer, who I don't have much to say on design-wise, because he just looks like a lawyer, but his lawyer, like, reaches out and grabs Will's hand to be like, wait, you can't actually do that, because in order to cut out a piece of flesh, you would have to draw blood, and ergo facto, you can't do that. You can't actually do the thing. And Will's like, "Ah, oh, damn, you got me. Shucks." And it would sure be a problem for me if I can't draw blood, because that's not the same as flesh. Damn, you got me. Anyway, if you would allow me to continue to question the defendant, right? And the judge is like, all right. And the judge has a cool design. I like that the judge, you know, he just kind of looks like a judge, but the one thing that stood out to me is the fact that his eyes are, like, very blue. And you guys know blue means justice. So I thought that was clever. But we see the judge sort of allow this. The judge is very curious about Will, and I like that he's playing it fair. Like, it's not like he's trying to protect Mr. Baxter. He's just he's a judge, right? He's listening to both sides, and he's sort of intrigued by Will, but he's not letting that sway him into just letting Will win. Will actually does have to earn this. But Will brings in the server, right? Like, the waiter who helps out Mr. Baxter. Well, not helps out Mr. Baxter, but serves Mr. Baxter at his favorite restaurant. And what does he serve him? Why, he serves him steak. About a half pound of steak. And he's asked, like, when you serve this half pound of steak, does Mr. Baxter tell you to drain the blood from the steak? And the waiter goes, no, I haven't had to do that in like 20 years. And he's like, oh, that's interesting. So what you're saying is that Mr. Baxter doesn't actually see the difference between flesh and blood, that they are in fact one and the same. That's interesting. And obviously Mr. Baxter's like, wait, no. And then, like, he even tries to, like, call into question Will's knowledge of Shakespeare, because he's like, how could you possibly know Shakespeare? That doesn't even begin to make sense, right? He gets very defensive. And Will's just like, and then Will hits him with the, like, oh, like, blah, blah, blah. Like, he hits him, he's just like with the line from Merchant of Venice, which, is not, like, one of my favorite Shakespeare plays, thus I do not know much of the lines. But he hits him with it, and he goes, yeah, I know most of his 40 plays off the top of my head. Like, I have them memorized. And I'm like, of course you do. But you know, Mr. Baxter's like, that doesn't even begin to make sense. Right? How? I don't understand. But we know it's because Will spends most of his time in the library. So, yeah, Mr. Baxter tries to call this out. It doesn't work. And this is where Will is actually able to help the orphanage, because he says, like, all right, I'll just take that pound of flesh from you now, and I'm going to cover your face, because the others don't need to see this. And I was like, damn, Will. And he goes like, wait, I lied. I'll give you half of my estate. And he goes, half? No, you're going to give me all of it, or I'm going to take a pound of flesh. It's your call. Right? And he's like, fine. Right? So now, it's funny because Mr. Baxter at the beginning of the court case had said that he's a fallen noble, even though he was lying, saying that his estate was under his friend's name and that his company was under his friend's name and all this crap. And it was all just a lie. But now he actually is a fallen noble, and he got by Will, which I think is just friggin' great. I absolutely loved the scene between him and Will. I thought Will played this whole episode like a champ. And he stuck it to good old Billy Shakespeare. He's like, screw you! The Merchant of Venice doesn't actually make sense, even though it doesn't matter. It's a story. But yeah, I thought that was really cool. However, I also want to point out the design of Mr. Baxter, which is super-de-duper good. Mr. Baxter is an example of, I think, one of the elements of Moriarty the Patriot that goes overlooked a bit, but one that I absolutely adore, and it's the choice in color and design. Adapting Ryunosuke Takeuchi's designs is Toru Okubo, who I think does a brilliant job. However, when it comes down to the things that always stick out the most to me, it's Sayoko Noda's color design, who Noda previously worked on Joker Game with a lot of the crew for this series. A lot of this crew actually worked on Joker Game in the past. And Noda's color choices for all these different characters is on point. Like, we know that Takeuchi likely picked a lot of the colors themselves, even though, you know, manga, but they still knew the different, like, colors for each of the designs themselves. But Noda's colors in particular, the way they pop and, like, really shine off the screen, like the way that they sort of illuminate the characters is really spot on. That's nowhere more evident than in Mr. Baxter's design. Mr. Baxter is this sort of dude who looks like you can trust him, right? Like, there's something trustworthy about him. He doesn't look nefarious, at least not right away. But when you first meet him, you understand why the caretaker would have believed Baxter, because he does look like a trustworthy guy, right? There's something about him. And I think one of the elements that makes you feel as though you can trust him is brown. As we know, and I've talked about in the past, brown as a color is the most dependable, slightly boring, it's a bit plain, but it's one of the most dependable and reliable colors in the spectrum, right? And this man has not only a brown suit, but he has brown hair and brown eyes, right? So it's as though he's like really trying to impart this dependability, this reliability, that you can trust him, that you can depend on him and rely on him to stick to his word as a noble, right? However, this is all a big facade. And the truth of Mr. Baxter is to be found underneath that, right? Underneath the suit, underneath the facade of the dependable noble lies the truth of his character, and that is the green vest and the green tie, which is, of course, green as a negative. Green as a positive is a restorative color. As a negative, it's a greedy color. And that's what we get here with Mr. Baxter. The truth is, he's a very greedy, money-focused man. And that's what lies beneath the surface of his character. He is very much focused on, he's got his mind on his money and money on his mind. You know, so the truth of his character, his true nature is money, is his own greed. And that's what's hidden underneath the suit, right? You can see it shine through, but to most people, they're going to be distracted by all the brown in the design, right? It's only once you really get a look at him that you're like, oh, he is untrustworthy, because you can see that, right? It's there, but it's underneath the facade, which again, it's just like, that's just a theory, a character design theory. But I do think that was very much intentional. And even, I say that because even the mood lighting for the character, like, it's green, right? Now, we've seen the show use mood lighting for different characters all the time, right? Like, Sherlock's is blue, Moriarty's is red, right? And for a lot of the more villainous noble characters, it's green because they're greedy and selfish, right? Like, that's what comes from green as a negative. So that's why they're always, like, silhouetted in green, right? It's a very green as a mood lighting color within the universe of Moriarty the Patriot is usually meant to indicate greed and a selfish desire, right? So that is very clear when we see Mr. Baxter like chuckling to himself that Will just loaned him that money. It's a super, super good design. And I have to give credit to Okubo and Noda for adapting Takeuchi's design so well, and for really selling these characters on their design and the choices in color. I think that they're super, super good. I talk about it a few times here and there, but it's one of the things about Moriarty the Patriot that I think I love the most is just how good the show looks, and it really does look good. However, the other big thing about the show that I love is, of course, the Sherlockian stuff. All the Sherlock stuff is fantastic. And Milverton in particular is going to be a problem. Because, again, if you know Milverton, or Magnuson, as I believe they call him in the BBC show, he is a whole ass problem. He is known by Sherlockians as one of the most despicable and disgusting people that Sherlock Holmes had ever come across during his adventures, right? Of all Sherlock's adventures, Milverton is the one who he always describes as being the most foul, like the most despicable. And that's who Moriarty is going up against, is Charles Augustus Milverton, who is basically this insanely well-connected blackmailer, right? Like the thing that Milverton does that Sherlock finds so deplorable is that he purposely goes out of his way to find things on people and to use it and sell it to the highest bidder and to basically have everybody under his thumb. He's a slimy, slippery individual, and he's always one of those characters who you love to hate in wherever he shows up. And so having Milverton in Moriarty the Patriot, of course they had to do the thing they do with all these characters, is they're like, let's take a Sherlock character and then we'll make them hot. And I'm like, all right. Like, as soon as he showed up, I thought of Squidward's like, oh no, he's hot, right? Because it's like, damn it, why Milverton too? Like, everybody in this show is like, all like the major players, it's like, and then we'll make them hot. But yeah, so they make Milverton hot. But Milverton, the reason why we're being told the story of the Merchant of London is because Milverton is going through all these old files, and one of the files he finds is the time that Will won this court case. And so Milverton catches on through this court case, like he looks through the court case, and then he looks at the Moriarty family, like how they are currently versus how they were before the fire, and he puts two and two together, and he catches on to the Moriarty's true history. So he's starting to already build up some blackmail against Will. He knows that Will isn't actually like the William that we know, you know what I mean? Like he's already catching on to the fact that it's like he just took his place. Like he took the original William's place, and that's who like the world thinks. Because I forgot about that. Like, and I do forget that from time to time, that the world thinks that William is a true Moriarty, when in fact he was adopted in. And the only true Moriarty left standing is actually Albert. And Will and Lou, while we love them, it's only Al that's the real Moriarty, right? Like Will and Lou, they're adopted in. And Lou is still considered to be, like, Lou is still Lewis, right? Like he's, like, they just assume that he survived the fire, but the other adopted child died, and that was Will. Remember, because they put younger Will, or they put the original William Moriarty there and took our Will's place. It was a whole thing. So Milverton catches on to this, and it's because the gang purposely left that information behind just in case anyone would go digging for it, because anybody smart enough would be somebody who they need to take out. So Will basically tells everyone, Milverton is now our current strongest foe, and I need you to be very cautious of them, and then I need you to eliminate Milverton. So it's like, damn, like we're actually going to go toe-to-toe, so Moriarty versus Milverton. Two of Sherlock Holmes's greatest enemies are now going head-to-head, and that's friggin' cool. Right? I was like, hell yeah, dude, that's awesome. So I cannot wait to see Will versus Milverton. And the fact that they bring up eliminate Milverton has me very curious as to how it's going to go down. Like how they're going to face off with Milverton, right? Because like, what's that gonna be? Like, what's that even gonna look like? Is it gonna be this like war on the streets of London, but like with words, you know? Like, is it gonna be this? Is it gonna be more like? So is it gonna be an espionage thing, like a James Bond thing? Is that where Bond's gonna get involved, or is it going to be more of a Death Note thing, where it's more of like a battle of wits? I'm very curious, like how it's gonna play out. And I do want to talk very briefly about some future stuff with Milverton. And Moriarty as well. So if you don't want to know Sherlock spoilers, I guess, this isn't Moriarty the Patriot spoilers. This is Sherlock Holmes, Arthur Conan Doyle stuff. Okay, so this is spoilers for Sherlockian stuff. I'd say spoilers for the books, and like not the Moriarty the Patriot books. I mean the OG books, and kind of the BBC. In fact, yes, and the BBC Sherlock story. So, spoilers for those if you don't want to know, but I do want to talk about some things. So, if you want to dip out now, it's a good time. However, I'm going to begin talking about it. Okay, 3, 2, 1. So, how is Milverton gonna die this time? Okay, when I saw them say we need to eliminate Milverton, I actually didn't think of the canon way he dies. I thought of the way Charles Augustus Howell dies, which, if you didn't know, is the original real-life inspiration for Charles Augustus Milverton. Now, Charles Augustus Howell was a real-life blackmailer and one of humanity's most infamous ones, and the way he died IRL is he was found with his throat slit open with a coin in his mouth. Now, that to me is very interesting, because when police found that and then they went to search his house, they found all these papers on all these people, right? So it's like, it seemed as though somebody who was being blackmailed had enough of being blackmailed and just went out and killed him. So my thing was, when I heard, like, eliminate Milverton, I almost wondered if it was going to be more inspired by Howl's death, where, like, it was going to be Moriarty's gang actually finding him and then just going full covert ops and slicing and dicing and then leaving the coin as, like, a final insult, right? Like, that'd be cool. Or it could be a spin on his canonical death in the books, which, if you remember, it's where Milverton gets shot by a woman who he assumed he was selling blackmail to, like blackmail on some noble person. But instead, it turned out that the woman was the widow of a man who Milverton's blackmail got killed. And so she kills him. And then Sherlock burns all his notes and hightails it the hell out of there and refuses to actually help find Milverton's killer because screw him. So my thing is, it could be a spin on that the woman in question, maybe it's actually like Fred posing as a woman, or maybe it's like maybe it's actually Will, but the lighting is too dark to see, right? Like it could be like something like that, where maybe it's like Irene in like a wig, right? Like since we know, well, not Irene, but you know what I mean. Maybe it's Bond, like in their original Irene guise, but then that wouldn't make sense because Sherlock is in the room when this is happening. So, like, not that he sees, but him and Watson are hiding in the room as that happens. So if he heard Irene, he would jump out. So, like, maybe that's where him and Bond meet? I don't know. But it could be interesting. The only other way they could do it is, as I said, the BBC Sherlock way, where Sherlock just shoots Milverton in the face. I kind of don't think that's what's gonna happen. But maybe that's what Will does. Maybe they like lean into the BBC Sherlock thing and they have Will just shoot Milverton in the face. I kind of doubt that, but again, that's why I'm leaning more into, like, I think it's either going to be inspired by Howl's death or it's going to be a spin on the canonical death. But either way, I'm excited to see Milverton just be a shithead for a while. I don't really want him to die for a bit because he's such an asshole. And maybe they won't even kill him. Like, maybe they're not gonna, because Moriarty the Patriot has been sort of doing things that aren't canon, right? Like, they're doing things that aren't canon to what Doyle intended, but it's always been sick. So I'm not against them just actually keeping Milverton alive this whole time. Like, I'd actually be down for that. But with that said, everybody, that is going to wrap up today's video here. So I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to boop that up snoot, share if you care, leave a comment down below, and of course, make sure that you hit that subscribe button, ring that bell, set notifications to all, and let all of AndyTube know that you're here. And before we go, as always, I want to give a big thank you to the good folks in the T Squadron. Look at these beautiful people. Look at all these beautiful names, and hey, if you would like to join these beautiful people, there are two ways to do so. The first is by hitting that join button right beside the sub button, or you can hit that Patreon link in the description for just a single $1 and have your name scrolling past the screen here. Either way, it is super appreciated. So once again, a big thank you to the good folks in the T Squadron. And that is it for me. Another super solid episode of Moriarty the Patriot. And no, these videos didn't go away. I will make like an update video soon, just talk about the new schedule. But yeah, none of the videos are going away. It's just I reorganized the schedule, so I'm doing videos once a day again. So yeah, don't worry. Moriarty the Patriot's not going anywhere. I know that these videos don't do like big numbers, and that makes some of you guys like nervous that I'm going to stop covering it. But if we keep hitting the like goal, I'm not going anywhere, because you guys hitting the like goal tells me that even though these videos don't do well, you guys still love to see them, so I still want to make them. And as long as I'm loving the show and I'm happy to talk about it, and you guys are loving the videos and are happy to listen to them, I'm going to keep making them. So yeah, Moriarty the Patriot ain't going anywhere. Do not worry. And yeah, anyway, bye.